Okay, I think that we are on the internet. So first of all, hi friends, and welcome to Smart Water Wednesdays. We are a few minutes away from the top of the hour, so we're gonna just take a minute to get to know my guest today, and we will get started with the official content as soon as the top of the hour gets here. So I appreciate you being here. It's great to spend another Wednesday with you, and I would like to welcome, with no further ado, my old friend, Carlos Perez. Carlos, how you doing?
Great, man. Thank you for having me today. Looking
For,
forward to it.
for those of you who don't know, Carlos Perez is somebody who has been at this WeatherTRAK thing longer than me, which is saying
Barely,
a lot
barely.
at this point. Carlos is at this point, I'm just going to use the word
Okay.
lifer at the
Yeah.
Hydropoint Data Systems, has been a part of this since before I even started. Carlos, when did you start with Hydropoint?
I started in like March of 2005.
March of 2005, which beats me by a solid 2 years, right? I didn't start until April of 2007. So we are off and running for sure. Carlos is one of very few people with longer tenure in this company than I have. But in that time, Carlos has done some amazing things. So if you remember back to the ET Plus days, Carlos was the man on the phone. Carlos answered the 800 number for many, many years. Carlos, tell me your favorite memory about working for the customer service line.
I think the favorite is just the ability to just meet all these incredible people all over the country from different aspects of life and just experiences. I think that's the one that holds me is getting to just build relationships and understanding what our product does and kind of how we fit into water management. So again, I go back when we were sending ET just one time a week on Friday. It wasn't every day. So we've come a long way from that one day a week on Friday. So it's been an incredible journey, and it still continues to be a great wave to catch. And looking forward to the next 10, 15 years.
Absolutely. 15 down, 15 more to go. Let's just do this. I want to take a second because I think that what you do now is an exciting statement about where we are at as a company,
Right.
um, and what we have learned about not only technology, but the actual process of water management and implementing water management on sites for our customers. One thing at HydroPoint, we tout the idea of outcomes, right? We tout the idea that water management is all part and parcel as a part of the conversation with water savings, right? Water savings doesn't happen by itself. It is something that requires work to get there, technology to get there. WeatherTRAK puts the best tools in place for you to do that, but it still takes a great manager or at least a competent manager to kind of make sure that the technology is doing what it has set out to do. And a very common point of failure for our customers was that we would put the technology in place and then just hope that it worked. And we've learned the hard way that having somebody on the other end keeping track, just providing high level oversight, can be the difference between successful outcomes and not successful outcomes. Carlos, can you explain what the customer success division is and what you do for them?
Well, the customer success division basically, like you put it, Ben, is we're there to be the advocate for the customer in a way that, just like in your family, you have when you have a medical issue, you go to the hospital or a doctor, you're getting information, you're getting all that information, but Ben, essentially you're your own advocate or somebody who's helping you. In the water management side, the customer doesn't really have that. They have the landscaper who's doing the job, and they're doing the mow and blow, they're fixing repairs, but there's nobody kind of oversight or overseeing the water management, the usage, the water usage for a particular occasion. And based on our history and our technology that interfaces greatly on the cloud and has updated itself to basically us being the number one in water management for our landscapers. That whole, we're basically the Apple of landscape management, and our customers have learned that. And so we are now the advocates for those customers, and they look for us for that guidance. As we work with their management, with their landscape teams, we identify how the control works. And we're also, because so much changeover in the landscape management, we're there like all the time with them, like Allstate. We're always there with them every step of the way, every year. And we actually, to be honest with you, not that we're landscape companies, but we actually also help landscape companies understand how to work with their controls and how to fix problems on the site. So we really overall look at the water consumption from when our product's installed and help the customer and the landscapers how to maximize our product and be more efficient on site without having to spend more time and money there.
Absolutely. I love that. And what I really think of is the lessons that we learned along the way, right? We learned the hard way that if you put a controller on site and it creates alerts, that those alerts can affect the outcome that we're driving at. We're driving at better water management. We're driving it at water savings. And the technology is in place to catch something if it happens, create an alert if an alert-worthy event happens. But if nobody's there to see it, it just sits there and can cost you either gallons and dollars on the water bill or landscape, right? It can prevent the controller from running, and bad things happen that way. So yeah. I see your role really in just helping companies, helping organizations understand what it takes to provide the high-level oversight and the communication with contractors, making sure that they're adopting the technology, making sure they're using the technology to its greatest benefit. And it just takes some moving of pieces, some constant contact that we can't build into the technology. It's a personal touch that I love that they put you in charge of.
Yeah, you can't say it better. That was actually perfect, Ben. And from talking to landscapers for the last landscape companies across the country and customers for 18 years, the one thing I do notice that these landscape companies, their number one goal is to make sure that irrigation system is working. So they make sure that the pipes are all working properly, any leaks are repaired. But most importantly, the landscape itself is a big section, big piece of their business. You know, making sure the mulch is in place at certain times, the pesticide, new ground cover, or just new plant materials. So the WeatherTRAK controller itself and all of our products that WeatherTRAK provides really doesn't get the attention and need that the landscapers would like to, just because they don't have the time. So the tools that we are developing and applying out there just makes it so much easier to manage for them. And also, we also assist them because we're also monitoring all the system alerts for the customer, and working side by side with the landscaper and teaching them, you know, how to utilize the tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And now this is something that the customer pays for, right? This is a paid service, the customer success implementation services that it isn't part of the standard WeatherTRAK package, but it's great to know for all of our water nerds out there that WeatherTRAK has this type of support, has this type of education, right? Carlos and I are both in the education business. I am in the business of making sure that the users have all the technology and answers to all of their questions. Carlos is really helping organizations understand how to implement, understand the oversight that it takes and the ease that WeatherTRAK brings to that puzzle of how easy it is to get reports or to get information to the right person at the right time to make decisions that can inevitably save you water, save you landscape, and save you time, creating an efficient response to issues that don't take hours and hours and hours to get to the bottom of like they used to.
Yeah, but I was going to say one thing, and it's really, really evident in our business when we build relationship with not customers, maybe have like maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 15 sites, but when we have customers that we build relationships that have anywhere from 900 or 1,000 sites with our products installed, that's a lot of support in place to support these types of activities. So that's where we really, I think, shine in all of our technology and all of our processes, all the hard work we've done to really be able to roll out those types of services for those large type of customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just as a reminder, we are about to get started. We're at the top of the hour. We will get this thing underway. But we're taking a moment talking to my friend Carlos, who is the guest of the day, and the subject of today's webinar, the summer heat best management practices, is something that you and I developed together, right? Can you tell me a little bit about how we did that?
Well, we sat down one day and we try to look at basically what are some of the incoming calls that were coming in, and why the customers were constantly asking, why am I not saving? We've started to find out that some of the landscape support teams that are currently supporting those customers didn't really understand how the controller program changes really affected the actual landscape. And so we kind of sat down and said, we noticed that during the hot times, or during the times of the summer, being like basically June, beginning of June, all the way through the end of August, there was just a lot of hands-on changes to the control programming that a lot of our landscape customers didn't really quite understand what they were really doing. So we kind of thought about, why don't we develop a springtime program training session to basically help them understand the effects that they have, and also the different possible solutions they have available through either the mobile app or WeatherTRAK Central to kind of help minimize that unnecessary watering.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It's hand in hand, not only the programming, but you also have the irrigation system, that two work together. So it's been really successful, and I think that's really helped our WeatherTRAK brand across the country.
And to your credit, right, we took this basically from some of the accounts that you actively manage, and we've kind of workshopped this training so we can get it into a 30-minute format by doing this live for some of your major customers. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, one of our customers wanted to really utilize the automated by WeatherTRAK feature at the station level. So that's basically taking the ET value, the evapotranspiration value, the humidity, solar radiation, wind, and air temperature, all those four factors determine how much water is being absorbed from plant and soil released out to the atmosphere. So with that being an important part of the our customer savings and water management, they really wanted to make sure their support staff across the board utilize that technology as much as possible, unless we have new plant staff. So we rolled out about training. There was closely like between 65 and 100 people in this training across the country, and it really helped us not only explain how the control works, but most importantly for me, and Ben knows me, is a customer relationship. Is that relationship building that we're not rolling out, but we're extending and making sure that our support teams understand that we're here to help you. We're always here to help you, and it's just a phone call away or a click away through WeatherTRAK support and all the great videos done. So that was really important to really strengthen that customer relationship, because we're all on the same team. We all want to make sure everybody's successful, and I think that's the biggest thing I took out of it, is just making sure that they understand that we're all working together on the same team for the same goal for our customer, which is save water, save money, and save time.
And that's really what I wanted to highlight, right? Is that the outreach that this has created emphasizes that it's a team, right? The customer success doesn't do it themselves. They work hand in hand with both our customer and the landscaper or the irrigation contractor to make sure that they're using the technology to its greatest benefit. But really, that contractor, that irrigation manager, is the eyes on site. We're not taking any work from them, right? We are only helping them understand the technology that they are being asked to use.
That's a big culture change. Don't forget, because you're talking to people who have been in the industry for 30 years, and I hear it all the time. Carlos, I've been doing this for 35 years, 25 years, 22 years, and you're asking me to do something completely different. So to get that trust and to build that relationship, I've never done this, but for HydroPoint, I think that's been a key success for us, is building those relationships, allowing those customers, landscape customers, to trust us and understand we're working with them. And that's been huge for us.
Absolutely. And with that, I think we are right on time. Good fill, my friend. Good fill. So I am going to kick this guy off. First of all, hi everyone. My name is Ben Coffey. Welcome to Smart Water Wednesdays. I will be your host today. And today we are looking at, wait, let me share my screen. The summertime best management tips and tricks. So we are going to be going through some of the most common things that a new user might experience with WeatherTRAK and ways to stay on top of things that most commonly happen in the heat of summer when all your irrigation business is running at 600 miles an hour, right? We want to make this as easy to access, as easy to manage, the unforeseen things that just commonly happen and the implementation things that happen. We're going to talk about today, and we're going to get moving on. So as I mentioned, my guest today is Carlos Perez. He's my co-host, my old friend. He's actually the only other face you'll ever see in the alert videos. Bonus points to any water nerd out there who knows which alert video Carlos's face shows up in. But definitely somebody who I want to highlight for all of you guys. Get to know Carlos. He is a huge resource and a huge asset to our company. So thank you for being here, and thank you for all of that.
Thank
you. So in today's training, again, summertime blues, right? This is going to focus on the things that are most common to happen right in the heat of summer. And so we kind of stage this. We've got a spring training. We've got a fall and winter training. This is really just designed to focus on the things that happen when we are in the peak of irrigation system in terms of common programming adjustments that might have to happen, common alerts that you might have to manage, and then we'll take a quick demo of WeatherTRAK Mobile and show you what this all looks like on a workflow that is designed for those field techs, right? What it looks like on your app so that we can make it as easy as possible. With that, we want to always bring this conversation back to that concept of management. It sounds like features, but really what we're driving at is the goal is to make you as efficient as possible, to make time spent on site as valuable and productive as it can be. And so we're going to try and highlight these things, make you understand them today so that when you get out on site, the answers are at your fingertips, and the behavior, the solutions are easy to access and easy to get to. So we will save more water by doing that, and by all means, reduce operating costs by making the systems and teams as efficient as they can be. So let's jump in. Let's do this common programming adjustment thing. And when we talk about common programming adjustments, like Carlos mentioned, we want to drive at keeping this controller set to automated by WeatherTRAK. And I want to bounce out. I want to bring Carlos's face back into this. Carlos, you mentioned that one of your customers asked you to make sure that we were using this auto mode. Can you tell me a little bit about that and why that was important?
That was really important because one of my customers, after going through an extensive kind of internal auditing of their programming, they identified that there was at least close to a total of about $67 million of infrastructure damages and also water loss due to incorrect programming and also just not adhering or maintaining the level of service that that customer required. So with that, in fact, when the new RFP came out for part of the landscaping services for this customer who's quite large, they put into their RFP that it was necessary if they wanted to visit with them to ensure that they complete the WeatherTRAK basic training course, and that all of them would have to complete that, as well as that they would not be allowed. They would get mobile access, but until they I saw you do that. Anyway, until they proceeded and take another class, that they would then be allowed to learn and make adjustments needed for programming. But at that time, until that time, all the programming for automated by WeatherTRAK was going to be maintained and controlled by myself, as well as two internal customer contacts. So it just really kind of put the structure, like I said, in place, and then also educate and make everybody understand the goal, which is
Right.
water.
Which is where I come in, right? That's my water nerdness.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and share this back. And when I talk about auto mode, I talk about the fact that this is automated by WeatherTRAK, right? This is WeatherTRAK's way of delivering weather-based irrigation. And our way of delivering weather-based irrigation applies the science of irrigation. If you are a certified irrigation auditor, you'll know the LIR, or landscape irrigation requirement conversation, right? All we're doing is taking in all of the variables that determine how much irrigation a site needs to stay healthy, and managing that day by day to make sure that your plants get enough water to be healthy and not a drop more, right? Minimize the waste and the excess that can typically come from general unsmart controllers. And so when we talk about that science, we're talking about the scheduling engine, really. WeatherTRAK thinks that underneath every station, there's a glass of water. And the growing condition for your plant is adequate as long as that glass of water is totally full or 0% deplete. And the growing condition for your plant is adequate until that glass of water gets to be half full, or at most 50% deplete, right? That 50% is our maximum allowable depletion. Anything below that means that there's not enough water in the soil for the plant to stay healthy. So that 50% is kind of our trigger, right? We're going to keep our eye very closely on that 50% and irrigate. That's what prompts irrigation. So here on day one, you see we have a full glass of water. So we're going to take the day off and save any irrigation that's going to happen, right? But through this day, the weather has taken some of that water. The plant has taken some of that water. So by day two, I'm not at a 0% depletion anymore. I'm more like 25% deplete, right? And as an irrigator, this is when I would have irrigated. I was taught to look at the base of the plant, and if the base of the plant was dry, it's time to irrigate. But not so, right? There is still water in the soil. The deep and infrequent watering keeps those roots growing down and seeking out that water, makes for healthier plants, more sustainable plants, right? That really grow these enormous root systems and are as healthy as they can be. So we are making a healthier plant by taking this day off and saving that water, right? Knowing that there's water in the soil for the plant, it just has to go find it. But through this day, the sun has taken his share, the plant has taken his share, and by day three here, we're at the maximum allowable depletion, which is what prompts irrigation, fills that glass of water back up, and starts the process over again. So this automated by WeatherTRAK is really all about focusing on this depletion cycle. And the depletion cycle relies on two things, right? To calculate how fast water is leaving the site and the irrigation that we need to create to keep it well watered. It combines information from two different sources. First of all, we need this information from your stations. The landscape determines how much water it needs, what kind of plants you have, what kind of sprinklers you have, what kind of soil, and how much sun. All of those things factor into how much irrigation a station will need. And that changes from station to station, right? You have grass on some stations and shrubs on others, or spray heads on some stations and drip on others. All of these things change how that system needs to work. So that's the important part that Carlos is working hard with the field folks to make sure that this accurate information is plugged in for every station. Then WeatherTRAK steps in and delivers weather accurate to the square kilometer every day. And so we know exactly what the ET has been. And when we combine the weather variables with the landscape variables, we create this depletion model. or this landscape irrigation requirement. And that's kind of the heart of automated by WeatherTRAK, right? We expect a station to be at 0% depletion. We will irrigate when we get to be 50% depletion. So this is our trigger, right? And we also want to keep an eye out for stations that aren't watering, because a station that isn't allowed to deliver all it needs might get a station high depletion alert at 70%. And then not for today's conversation, but the maximum a station can deplete is at 125%. So we talk about that in the winterization conversation usually. So that is kind of the nutshell of how depletion works. And what we do is we take all that information and optimize an irrigation schedule for you that determines how much, how often, and how best to deliver the irrigation to make the best use of every drop of water, right? And if you get into the nerdy, if you've watched all of these episodes, you know that I have episodes on how much. We call that irrigation runtime. I have an episode on how often we create irrigation. We call that irrigation frequency. And then there's one called smart cycle, which determines how best we lay that water down. But that's what I want to take 1 second on, right? We optimize the program knowing how much water your plant needs, but also how much water your soil can accept at one time without running off, right? Without sending water down the gutter. So WeatherTRAK will create an irrigation schedule that uses a cycle and soak feature that maintains, delivers all of the water that your plant needs without ever exceeding the amount that your soil can absorb. So if your plant needs 15 minutes of irrigation, for example, and you are growing that plant on a clay soil that can only accept 5 minutes of irrigation at once, WeatherTRAK will automatically cycle and soak, deliver 5 minutes of a cycle, right? Deliver 5 minutes of irrigation, and then turn that water off. Let that first 5 minutes absorb in, and then while it's taking time off, it goes on to continue to irrigate the other stations around it, right? It doesn't just sit there and wait its turn. It makes the best use of that time, but after that soak time has passed, it will come back through and lay down a second 5 minutes, right? And then it'll turn off and let that second round absorb in. And then it'll come back through and lay down a third 5 minutes, completing the 15 minutes that your plant needs without ever exceeding the 5 minutes that your soil can accept. And by doing this, the EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency, proved that the WeatherTRAK scheduling engine reduces runoff by more than 70%. That means 70% less water going down the gutter, or in Carlos's defense, right? What Carlos said earlier was by not using auto mode, that he had customers that were experiencing landscape and site damage, right? That runoff is going to create havoc wherever it goes. So if you've got water going down the gutters, running across parking lots, it causes the need to repave and repaint those surfaces. That can be super costly and not always a part of what we calculate in the smart water equation. Carlos, does that sound right to you?
Absolutely perfect. And the one thing I even forgot to mention for another time, though, is the fact that a lot of our landscape companies, I said, some of our new folks that are joining on to their companies have no idea of the water restrictions across the country. So that's another one where automated by WeatherTRAK is another reason why you want to be able to use that feature, because it actually complements those restrictions.
Absolutely, something that we'll get into. I've got a slide just for that. So we are bouncing back, and then I go straight ahead. What we want to talk about is adjusting the irrigation schedules, adjusting the runtime. Okay, so in no place in the season is it more evident that the information in the program doesn't match the information in the field like the heat of summer, right? The heat of summer is the true test. An automated by WeatherTRAK station, once it is programmed correctly, will adjust based on the weather all the way through the seasons. You'll never have to touch an irrigation schedule from the time you turn it on in the spring to the time you turn it off in the fall, winter, right? However, what we want to do as we're implementing those scientific or ET-based schedules is look for times that you experience stress or experience too much irrigation, right? If it's getting a little too much or not quite enough, those are the things that we want to be vigilant about. We want to keep the landscape top notch and super healthy and eliminate any extra. And the way that we want to encourage you to do that, station by station, is using this feature that we call the percent adjust. I call it the easy button, right? This is the absolute easiest way to address dry spots in the landscape, because those ET schedules are trying as hard as they can to keep up, right? If they can't keep up, we might just need a little bit more to help it keep up. And 5% more might be enough, right? And if you adjust it 5%, that 5% stays on that station until somebody changes it. So you can put 5% in and take that over the top. Make sure that the landscape is beautiful, because I know that that's how irrigation guys and landscapers are judged, right? It's the health of the turf and the health of the landscape that it contributes to the bottom line. So it must be pristine. And so any spot of dryness, we can go in, easily adjust 5%. It will stay there. And in the colder seasons, it won't affect the water savings, but it will get to that peak need right as you need it the next time. Carlos, does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
Okay.
Easy feature.
So what we want to encourage you to do is look at this percent adjust tool. Now, for the average user, this is just the best practice method that I've put together. This is the Ben Coffee way of doing things, right? First, definitely make sure that the information in the program looks right to your eye. If you don't have the right plant type or sprinkler type, you are not going to have the right irrigation program, right? So if it's dry, don't be surprised, right? If you've got rotor heads and you put in spray heads, we're going to be developing a program for spray heads, which is half or less of what you need for a rotor zone. So make sure that the information in the defaults is right. Once you have given that a shot, and that's what we're watching implement, right? That's what we're trying to see if it works out on site. 70% of the time, that's going to succeed perfectly without any sort of adjustment. But another 30% of those stations really just need to be dialed in a little bit. They just need to be watched, especially in the heat of summer, to say, hey, this one needs a little bit extra, or this one we can back off. This one's still pretty wet, right? We can see how much we can save by turning down a station. So we try the defaults first, we watch and see too much or too little, and then we use the percent adjust to dial them in. Only when you reach an extreme on that percent adjust will you move to step 3, right? There are things in the deep, dark part of the program that I'll teach the water nerds of the world that will adjust your runtime, your frequency, or your cycle and soak, or your smart cycles. But the result is much bigger, right? The reason that I encourage you to use the percent adjust is because 5% means 5% and plus means plus, right? So it works exactly the way it should work in your brain. Those advanced features like precip rate and efficiency might get you more runtime, absolutely need to match, but it also is not quite as clean. A 10% adjustment of your efficiency can result in as much as 40% adjustment in irrigation time. So it doesn't directly correlate as well as the percent adjust could. Carlos, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a perfect sense on that setting.
Anything to build on that?
No, I think the one thing that there's a non-clone nature. I mean, misperception on the WeatherTRAK controller. The WeatherTRAK controller doesn't read the mind of the irrigation system, doesn't know the efficiencies or efficiencies. So that's where we can assist everybody on adjusting, making those slight adjustments. Because I always say, when somebody asks me, it's underwatering, I'm like, well, what's underwatering? Is it the entire property? Is it a section? And usually I find a high 90% of the time, it's usually a couple stations or a handful of stations.
And please let me be your water management nerd and say, do not see a dry spot and turn all stations up 25%. That is absolutely not the principles of smart water management. It is designed to be station by station. And so a dry spot on a station should be addressed on only that station, not for the entire controller. I speak from experience saying that is all too common.
Amen.
All right, so let's keep going. All right. Now, it's important to know that if you get to an extreme, we do have this option called user mode, right? User mode does not do any of the science that we just talked about. Depletion only belongs to automated by WeatherTRAK in the WeatherTRAK world. Depletion is not applied anyplace else in any other what we call station mode. Station mode determines how a station will generate its runtime. And I want to talk very briefly about user mode or user-defined station programming, right? That auto mode does that scientific thing. It combines station or landscape information with the weather data to optimize the schedule. We beat that one pretty hard. So what we want to talk about is user-defined. If you want to go in and program a controller to say, I want what I want, and I want to be able to depend on it, you absolutely have that option with WeatherTRAK. We have what we call user no ET, and you program in number of minutes per cycle, number of cycles per day, and number of days per week, just like you would with a basic irrigation timer, right? And so it really does, if you've got a special concern about your landscape and you don't want to use that weather-based irrigation, you can override it. Know that in Carlos's customer success role, for the customers and accounts that he manages, he's actually watching to see if stations get switched from auto mode to user mode. The accounts that he manages are driving at using that automated by WeatherTRAK. Can you talk a little bit about that, Carlos?
Yeah. So the goal, part of our savings, or part of our criteria for savings, is what the percentage of our stations are in auto mode, and because that really correlates in the long run, maximizing the automated by program, but really not allowing the landscape to get just overfilled or deep watering when it doesn't need to. And that's one of the biggest things that we find is that the landscapers will adjust it. They'll put it in user mode, like 35 minutes 3 times. Weather changes, and it's still irrigating those 35 minutes, whether it's a rotor or drip. And then come to find out if we're overwatering, like Ben said, we got runoff, and it becomes another thing we have to touch. So,
absolutely. So let's talk real quick about when it is appropriate to use that automate or that user mode, right? When I think of auto mode, I think of the science, but the science that WeatherTRAK is applying is the science of maintaining already established plant life, or keeping your green grass green, right? Keeping your landscape healthy. And there are times as an irrigator that you want to overwater. You've done a special project that will require more water to acclimate or to be successful. And so that's what user mode is all about, right? If you've laid down new sod or planted new flowers, fertilized, right? If you lay down a fertilizer, you want every station to water tonight, 30 minutes, wash that fertilizer down in, right? Without burning anything. This is a great example of when to use user mode. But I'll tell you this, when Carlos makes a call to one of his contractors, he asks 2 things. First of all, why did we switch from auto mode to user mode? And all of these are great examples of why you might do that. But the second question is equally or more important, and that is, when will it be switched back, right? We all know as irrigators how long we need to override that system. If it's fertilizer, it's just a couple of days. If it's new sod, it might be a couple of weeks, even a month. But you know the timeline that you need to override that schedule and overwater it to get your project to take. And so the important part of using user-defined programs is coming back and setting it back to auto mode when it's done. Carlos, I know you have something to say about that.
Yeah, that is so that's so critical when we do the establishment part of it, and really utilizing the features of the controller. And again, most importantly, is we're building that relationship, the trust within each other, knowing that they have the landscape teams have all these great little tools to use through mobile app and through WeatherTRAK Central, and still adhering and complying to our customers' goal, which is water management savings, and utilizing both user and auto, but majority auto, and only using user when we really need to in those specific cases. So
yeah, and admittedly, I am a WeatherTRAK nerd, and I use user mode in my yard every year when I am planting new gardens and getting my gardens going for the year. User mode is how I do that, right? And I get it back on auto mode as quickly as I can, but it's a whole different science. So there's no shame in using user mode. Just know that you are not saving water when you're doing that, right? And oftentimes saving water is why people invest in WeatherTRAK. All right, so enough about user mode. Let's just keep moving forward. Now I want to talk specifically about what Carlos said before. One of the most common conversations that come up in the heat of summer is water restrictions, right? And that is to say that in certain municipalities, the most common water restriction that we see across the board is a limiting of the number of days or hours in the day that you're allowed to irrigate. And so in Denver here, we are on 3 days a week, even though our drought map says that we don't need water restrictions. They have implemented them. They're just making it a common practice here, right? So they allow us to water 3 days a week. So I go in and I tell the controller, you're only allowed to water on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And when a station is automated by WeatherTRAK, it views those as available days. First of all, it will only water on available days. Second of all, if it hasn't reached its maximum allowable depletion, it will still take the day off, right? So if it needs to water, it absolutely will, but it still has the option of not watering if it doesn't need to. And you will be surprised at your shrub zones and your low use zones, how often, even in the heat of summer, we can skip a day of irrigation and maintain plant health. So it's just important to know that WeatherTRAK is designed to abide by any water restrictions that we've seen anywhere in the country. Will only water when you, the manager, say you're allowed to water. And then it will do its best to deliver all of the irrigation you need in the time that it has. And if you need more, then it will create an alert, which, by the way, is what is coming next. We'll talk about what those alerts look like. Carlos, anything about water restrictions before we move on?
It's just a very right now important piece of our service for we're high point performance management service we provide as a senior customer success manager for some of these large accounts. That is number one on the priority list, is to make sure that these WeatherTRAK controllers or controllers out there are not irrigating outside of water restrictions, and that's very important. Like I mentioned, there were hundreds of thousands of dollars being fined to these customers, and that's really has been put to a stop. And in some cases, different parts of the country, turf is not being watered anymore. So turf is out of the equation. I know in California, there's a lot of sections where turf isn't irrigated. So it's definitely an education for all of us. I know it's difficult sometimes when you hear that in Florida, I'm only allowed to irrigate on Tuesday. In certain counties in Texas, Thursday and Friday. And that's, again, a different shift in culture for our landscape companies who are just used to putting water on the property. Like Ben said, they get water out there, customer sees green, and they're happy. So we're in a different shift right now to really just kind of manage and save the water as best as we can in every aspect of our service.
Absolutely. So just make sure that we are always programming those controllers to local water restrictions, because we don't want to leave our customers subject to the fines and penalties that can come along with not obeying whatever restrictions or regulations are in place. All right. So back to you. Bam. Ready to go. And that is really all we need to say about water restrictions. It is always an important conversation to have, and WeatherTRAK is there to support you. Now, we want to talk about those common summertime alerts that happen as a result of that oftentimes. So just 3 different alerts we're going to talk about, and then we'll be done for today. So first, I want to talk about the water day alert. This is a abundantly common alert. This is something that I, with 3 days a week in Denver, get from about the middle of May to about the end of September, because what a water day alert is trying to tell you is that the scientific irrigation schedule that WeatherTRAK has created would ideally like to have more days than you've allowed in your water restriction. So when I tell my grass that it only has 3 days a week to water, as soon as it wants 4 days a week, which is pretty early in the summer, it creates this alert, right? It says, hey, I want more days. And that's fine. That's awesome. It's good management information. It's not always actionable, but it's great to know that the WeatherTRAK is looking out for you. So first, we need to know how the controller responds, right? As soon as it realizes I want that 4th day, the first thing that happens is it raises the alert. It says, hey, okay, I'm telling you, I'm making adjustments to the schedule. Then you'll notice on the days that it is allowed to run that it will run longer. The irrigation run times expand because it's trying to water that what it would do on that 4th day inside those 3 days, right? It's trying to make up the irrigation that it needs in the time that it has. But importantly, it will always abide by those water restrictions. It will only water when you tell it that it's okay to water. Okay. This is very common in the heat of summer, especially when we combine it with any sort of restriction or regulation, right? If you have mandatory day restrictions, this is just gonna be a part of what you see in the summer. And as when the irrigation can fit into the time that it has, when it wants 3 days again, that alert will resolve itself. So it's not something that you can do. If you have extra days to give it, by all means, give it more. But if you can't give it more, just know that the WeatherTRAK is going to do the best it can do with the time that it has. Okay? That leads me to the next part of the restriction, right? And we're no longer talking about water days. We're talking about hours in the day, or the water window. And the water window alert tells you that the irrigation schedule that we're calculating takes more time to deliver than you've allowed in your water window setting. Okay? So you've determined how many hours we're allowed to water at night. I'm allowed to water 10 hours a night, and I've just calculated a irrigation program that's going to take 11 hours to get through. And that's not uncommon in the heat of summer, right? We're pushing all the limits. And so when I get this water window alert, it's important to know how the controller is going to respond. First of all, first thing it does, creates the alert, raises its hand and says, I'm making adjustments to your irrigation schedule. Second thing is equally important, right? Because it is a competitive advantage. What WeatherTRAK does when it realizes that it can't deliver all of the irrigation that it wants to in a night, it turns down all stations incrementally to make sure that every station that needs a drink gets a drink, right? It won't just lop off the last few stations like other technologies are known to do, right? Because the next night, if they need extra time, those same stations get lopped off and then they never get water. But with WeatherTRAK, we'll turn down all stations to make sure that everything gets some water. And then we'll remember which stations didn't get their full value and tack that on to future irrigation programs. So again, the next time it waters, if it has extra time, it will make up anything that you lost. And as soon as it can get all of the water that it wants to lay down in the time that it has, that alert will disappear. But importantly, always going to abide by the programming, right? Never going to water when we're told not to. WeatherTRAK takes its stance on water restrictions very firmly, and we want to make sure that the users aren't programming in a way that leaves the customers subject to fines and penalties. Again, the water window warning only carries over in auto mode. User mode, if you prescribe an hour a station on 12 stations and then only give it 10 hours to water, you're going to have 2 extra hours there. It's going to create the water window alert. It's going to turn everything down incrementally, but no irrigation carries over in a user-defined situation, right? What you lose that night, you just lose. Carlos, anything about that? Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. A great feature, and that's another great service that HydroPoint provides is through our customer support and the incredible treasure chest of bulk information that Ben has provided for videos for water window and day alert, and especially for those controllers that have high station counts, 87 stations. We're there. We can definitely help you with adjusting that programming to meet your needs.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast you'll hit a water window alert on a high station count controller. Yep. It is a part of the battle for sure. And just so you know, if you are battling water window alerts, WeatherTRAK has a variety of options, things like overlapping programs or even OptiFlow that make managing those water windows as efficient as it can be. So if you are battling water windows and you want some advice, talk to one of these 2 water nerds. We will point you in the right direction.
OptiFlow.
All right. And then, so I will bring this back. Last but not least, and common scenarios. This just happens in the heat of summer. This is something that is very, very regular. And by giving the controller more time, you can make that go away, right? Or when it gets... when it can fit into the time that it has, it will absolutely resolve itself. Okay. And then the one thing that I have to teach about both water day and water window is because they are reacting for you, it doesn't always require a resolution, right? It is something that I see on my controller very routinely, and I just disregard, right? I know that the controller is doing its best. I know that it's going to make up when it can. And so I know that I can just let that live there and it doesn't require any action on my part. It might just sit there for the duration of the heat of summer. Okay. And then the last alert that we want to talk about today is station high depletion. This is the real dog, right? Because when we talk about the station high depletion, that means that a full glass is 0%. We want to irrigate at 50%. And a station high depletion means that it's reached 70%. And there has to be a reason for that, right? So I have it animated here, right? Field capacity. We're not thirsty here at 0%. At 50%, we would irrigate. This 70% level, much below when we would prompt irrigation, is when you get that station high depletion alert. Lots of things can cause this. If you have the controller off, right? It's continuing to collect depletion. It wants to water, but it's not allowed to because the controller is off, right? And so it gets thirstier and thirstier and thirstier. Then when you kick it back on, the controller knows how thirsty every station is and will make up the irrigation that it's lost. But If you let it go too long, you'll pass into the 70% depletion and get station high depletion alerts. It just is what it is, right? Another thing that might cause a station to get a high depletion alert is a different type of alert, right? If you break a wire and you get a no connect alert, the schedule knows that that station's getting thirstier and thirstier and thirstier, but the controller can't irrigate, right? Because the wire's broken and that alert is stopping the irrigation from happening. So oftentimes when I see a station high depletion alert, it accompanies a different alert. It just meant that the response on that alert let the irrigation go so long that the landscape is now super thirsty, and we can, when the fix is made, the controller will catch it back up, right? And we'll know how much water we need to deliver to make that plant life happy and healthy again. So we go through the depletion modeling. One thing I do want to highlight is that you can manually adjust the depletion. So when I am battling station high depletion alerts, sometimes I will manually reset the depletion, which is something that you can do from the app. You see this current depletion setting here on the station programming page. And you can only program a station between 0 and 50%. So anytime you're getting a station high depletion alert, that means you pass 70%. I encourage you, if you are going to manually reset it back to 50. It will get rid of that alert, but still know that as soon as it can irrigate, it's going to deliver a full cycle of irrigation to that station, right? You don't want to set it to 0% because then you might miss a cycle, and that's the last thing you want on a station that's already stressed. Oh, and look at that. I have a picture of what it looks like. All right. So, Carlos, those are the kind of nuts and bolts of what we wanted to cover today. I want to show it off on WeatherTRAK Mobile and then call it quits. Anything to build on before I do that?
No, I think we covered all of the key components that contribute to why we want to trust our technology, and also why we probably, if we're not sure on how to use our technology, why we're trying to adjust the landscape. And again, it's important that knowing the effect that we have, any changes we make will affect the landscape. So we want to make sure we're putting the right amount of water, using the right amount of adjustments on the controller, and that's what we're here to help you.
Amen. It's the dog days of summer, right? So this is just the stuff that we most commonly see in all of the summer months. So last, I want to show you where that stuff applies. Super quick demonstration of WeatherTRAK Mobile, so you'll know how to get there on your workflow. For that, we're going to use WeatherTRAK Mobile 3.0, right? Make sure your WeatherTRAK Mobile has the little crescent moon. These guys up here were great back in the day, but now dated. So we want to use WeatherTRAK Mobile 3. And you'll notice that when I log in, you see all of the sites and accounts that I've been granted access to manage. So I scroll down and find the site that I want to pick on. Let's call it this Rainy Days Resort. Right, so I want to move from sites to controllers. To do this, I use the small button on the right. That will take me from the sites to the controllers. And the alerts are a function of the controllers page. So I want to hit this settings page, or the big button on the left on the controllers page, to see those alerts. Right, and boom, right off the bat here, I see two of the alerts that we've been talking about today. Water day and station high depletion. So again, if you want to learn more about those, you just click on that alert and it will give you all of the details about that alert, any stations that are affected, tips and tricks on how to resolve that, even a video made by yours truly if you want to know more about the nerdiness of the WeatherTRAK alerts. Okay. So that is where we see and manage the alert information. And then if we want to do that station programming stuff, one more thing here. We also have this program tab. So this is your alert toolbar. We started out on alerts. If I go to the other end, I see the program. This is where I can go in and change all of my days and times, all of my water restriction information. So for program A, if I wanted to change to Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, I'd click on program A. I'd scroll down here. I'd see it's set to optimized by WeatherTRAK. I'd change that guy from optimized by WeatherTRAK to days of the week. And then see my options here. I want to select only the start times that live on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'd hit OK and make that change to the program. So it's important, again, make sure that you're only watering at the days and times that your local restrictions will allow. Okay. Anything else on the controllers page, Carlos?
No, that's it.
All right. I think I got it. Don't need to save that. Now we want to go. I'll start at the very beginning, right? We go to the sites page and we go through the controllers page by hitting the small button on the right, and hit the small button on the right again to go down to the station level page. And here on the station level page, first we see what you can use as your remote control if you want to use this for manual irrigation. But what we want to do is look at the settings, right? If I go to settings for station 1, I see all of the stations, and I can change the station mode if I choose. I want to take it out of auto and put it in user defined programming. You can do that here, which we have discussed. We also have down here all of the settings in auto mode, the very first of which is that percent adjust, right? This is the key thing. This was what we wanted to walk away with. So it has been turned down by 35%. I want to turn this guy back to 0. All right, maybe it's dry. I got a little overzealous with the turn down and got to 35%. Easy enough to just make that adjustment, right? If you need more, go toward the plus. If you need less, go toward the minus. And then last but not least, we do have that current depletion right here, right above that line, right? So when your stations are in auto mode and you're using the depletion, if you've got a station high depletion alert and you want to reset it, go to this current depletion line, click on it. And again, if you're taking away a station high depletion alert, I recommend sending it a 50% depletion so that it still waters tonight, but you get rid of that alert. And always apply, always save and send. All right. Carlos, does that sound like everything we covered today?
Yeah, and then just a reminder, when you go into your mobile app and you're looking at your controller list, remember that the controller at the very top will always be the controller closest to you geolocated. So just a reminder on that. I apologize if you may have covered it already. So just when you go to the whole list there to see all your controllers for different locations, that controller at the very top there, the CPS, the copy basement demo. That is the controller that's the closest geolocation of where you are standing.
As if it's sitting right here in my basement.
There you go.
Right? All right. Carlos, I want to thank you so much for making time on a bright and early Wednesday morning. I always appreciate your friendship and your wisdom. This has been such a treat. Thank you for making time to do this with me.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I'm excited for us both and to continue our journey together, and the love and passion we have for landscape management and working with all our customers across the country. So thank you.
Thank you. Likewise, and to all of those water nerds out there, know that between customer success and training, we've got your back. We can add into that some customer support line who have the 800 number and are ready for questions. But if there's anything that we can do, please don't hesitate to give us a shout. And until next month, we will see you signing off from Smart Water Wednesdays. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.